Senator, thanks so much for talking to us again.
Absolutely. It's always good to be with you, Jorge.
So, you know, I have to ask you about marriage equality. I saw the front page of the New York Times the other day, equal dignity. Men kissing men, women kissing women. What do you see? Many people think that love wins, equality wins, but give me the line that we're going to see in history books in 100 years.
Look, what I would rather see is the Constitution wins and the rule of law wins. You know, I've spent my entire life fighting to defend the Constitution. As you know, I've got a new book that came out today, A Time for Truth. And in that book, it describes how, starting when I was a teenager in Houston, I studied the Constitution. I traveled the state of Texas speaking on the Constitution. I clerked at the U.S. Supreme Court for Chief Justice Rehnquist. I spent over a decade litigating cases and winning before the Supreme Court. And the decision last week on marriage was fundamentally inconsistent with the Constitution. The Constitution leaves marriage for the states from the beginning of our country, and so you and I may disagree.
But you don't like that decision. I mean, it's interesting because you worked for the court for so many years, and now it seems that you are not respecting their decision.
Well, it's interesting. You and I may disagree, and reasonable minds can differ. Under our Constitution, if you want to change the marriage laws, if you want gay marriage adopted in your state, there is a method under the Constitution to do that, and what that is you can try to convince your fellow citizens to change the marriage laws in your legislatures. That's the way the Constitution works, and it may be that New York and California would make different policy decisions than Texas and Florida. That's the way our constitutional system should work. You know, Justice Scalia in dissent, he powerfully observed this decision is a fundamental threat to democracy, because why would we want 5 unelected lawyers making the most important policies?
That's the way it works, Senator.
But it's not the way it works.
That's the way it works.
It's not the way it works under our Constitution.
But you just didn't like the decision, and now you're criticizing the court.
No, I don't like that 5 justices decide their policy answer on this question is more important than the views of 320 million Americans. I believe in democracy.
I've seen the polls. The Wall Street Journal says 59% of Americans support marriage equality.
But number one, those polls, you know, there's an old line that they're lies, damn lies, and statistics. You can craft a poll, and there are a lot of advocates who are writing polls.
59%.
But let me give you 2 facts that are inconsistent with that. Number one, 40 states have adopted laws or constitutional amendments protecting traditional marriage. Look, in the Hispanic community, our community values traditional marriage as the union of one man and one woman. That is very much the case in the Hispanic community.
Many Latinos, and we have to accept, are very open now to the idea of equality.
A lot more of them in the media than actually in the country. 40 states have protected traditional marriage, and indeed, just a few years ago, California, not a conservative state, bright blue, liberal California, they had a referendum statewide on marriage. And a majority of Californians, when they had the opportunity to vote, voted in favor of traditional marriage. And you know who voted overwhelmingly in California for traditional marriage? Hispanics and African Americans.
But aren't you discriminating? Aren't you putting gays and the LGBT community as a second-class citizen?
I don't believe that following the Constitution is discriminating against anybody. If you want to change the laws, go convince your fellow citizens. I mean, I would ask you, Jorge, don't you believe in democracy?
Of course I believe in democracy. I believe in equality. I believe in the Declaration of Independence. It says all men are created equal. That's precisely what the judges did at the Supreme Court. Why gays don't have, in your view, the same rights as the rest?
Of course they do. Every American has the same rights. But okay,
if they would follow your view, they wouldn't be able to get married.
Actually, whether they were able to get married or not would depend on their state laws. Some states have chosen to adopt this, but there's a reason why left-wing activists went to the courts. Because the American people didn't support this. Listen, if your theory were right that the American people support this, there would have been no need for the lawsuit in the case, because they could have gotten it adopted democratically. The reason they're forcing it on the voters is because it is driven by elite opinion. You are absolutely right.
But it's not
in
my
Manhattan
opinion.
and D.C. and on the West Coast, this is a popular position, but in most of America,
it's not only my position. It's the letter, the Declaration of Independence, and it's. Let me try something else.
Yeah.
Okay. How about this? Once you were at a dinner and you were asked about your daughters.
Yeah.
And how would you react if they were gay? And you answered, we love our daughters unconditionally.
Of course.
Why would you deny your daughters the right to get married to a woman if that's what they desire eventually?
You know, I find it interesting that folks in the media are surprised that Christians and conservatives love their children. I love my daughters with all of my heart. And it's interesting, you mentioned that dinner. That was a dinner that two gay men...
months ago?
A couple of months ago, two gay men in New York City hosted for me. It was primarily on foreign policy. It was primarily concerning Israel policy, and it was a fundraiser. And afterwards, you know, the media ran a story, and I think it was envisioned this was going to be some expose that conservatives would be mad at me. You know what's interesting, Jorge? There was no reaction in the Christian community, the conservative community. Look, we'll speak to anybody, and we've got support across the spectrum. The radical left in the gay rights community have boycotted those two gay men, have picketed those two gay men, have ostracized those two gay men. How dare you speak with a conservative Republican? And the narrative that's told in the media is a narrative that suggests somehow that Christians are intolerant, when really it's the extreme left who's persecuting Christians.
Do you think that gays are born that way?
Look, it's not a question.
Oh, yes, but that's an important one, because if it's something that you can change, therefore, why would you be discriminated?
Can I ask a question, Jorge?
Sure.
Look, we did this interview to talk about my new book, A Time for Truth.
I know, and I'll get to that.
And one of the things I'm amazed at is the media, with all respect, is obsessed with sex. It's the only thing you want to talk about.
You're the ones who started talking about this.
No, actually, you raised the topic. And why is it that...
You've been talking about this extensively in interviews.
I have been talking about the Constitution for over 30 years.